Welcome to Bible Study Hub. I'm Ann Wiggins, and I'm so happy to be with you tonight as we continue our study in the book of Genesis. We're getting towards the end now. So we've been talking about Joseph here for quite some time. He's had a harrowing experience being sold into slavery by his brothers, who initially thought they would just kill him for the dreams that he had. That's all going to come back tonight. So we're going to talk about that later. He ends up serving Potiphar in his house, a high-ranking government official. He gets falsely accused of trying to commit rape with Potiphar's wife, who was totally at fault for this. Gets thrown into prison. We think he's in prison about 12 years before he finally is let out. You can go back and listen to previous studies if you missed some of that. But we just kind of ended up last week by saying that God had a purpose in Joseph's suffering, and how God has a purpose in our suffering. Even though we don't like to go through it, there are things that are accomplished in suffering that, quite frankly, are not accomplished probably any other way. So God has trained Joseph for the job that is coming, and he has set him in a position to not only achieve reconciliation with the brothers who almost killed him and ended up selling him into slavery, but to set that up for the children of Israel to grow to a vast number in Egypt and then be rescued by God himself as he leads them out 400 years later. So it's a lot going on. We're going to pick it up at the end of chapter 41, which is where we ended last week. So if you're turning in your Bible, get to chapter 41 and we'll pick it up in verses 50 to 52 here. Before the year of famine came, two sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house. The name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So he names them forgetfulness and fruitfulness. And I just think it's interesting. First of all, those are Hebrew names, not Egyptian names. So he has maintained his Hebrew-ness, even though he is now married to an Egyptian. And obviously, he looks Egyptian. He serves Pharaoh in Egypt as his number two guy. But his heart is still Hebrew. And so he has had to deal with the trauma of the betrayal of his family for the last 13 or so years. And he says, finally, I'm able to move on. It's not like he forgot them. He didn't forget that they existed or not know who they were anymore, obviously. He's just able to move forward finally. So he names his firstborn, basically, I'm able to move forward now. And his second one is, wow, God has been so good. He's just been so good to me, fruitfulness. Let's pick it up in verses 53 to 55. We'll end up this chapter. We'll move into chapter 42. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end. Remember, he had prophesied based on Pharaoh's dreams. There will be 7 years of just vast, amazing produce. Then 54 says, and the 7 years of famine began to come as Joseph had said. There was a famine in all lands, so the surrounding territory around Egypt as well. But in all the land of Egypt, there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says to do, do. So everything happens exactly as Joseph had been told by God and prophesied. So now it's the moment of truth. Did Joseph get it done? Did he do a good job? We said last week that this wasn't just as easy as, we'll just collect some grain. This was a massive undertaking to create the storage, to bring in the extra, that the people would still have food to eat, plenty of food. They were responsible as well to store up for themselves. They didn't run out for a while, but that he was able to store enough grain. We'll find out. Did he make it happen? 56 to 57. So when the famine had spread all over the land, Joseph opened up the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. Now, when the Bible says all the earth, it doesn't mean exactly like the entire globe. It means the known civilization at that time, right? We say the same thing. Like the whole country, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean every single person in the entire country. It just means generally speaking. So that's what that means. So we move on to chapter 42 now. Now, I don't know, does anybody here like flashbacks when you watch TV shows or movies? You know what I'm talking about, a flashback where you've got the storyline going, and then all of a sudden it flashes back to an earlier time. I remember when I was a child, I don't even know how old I was. I think probably junior high, maybe early high school. And my dad and I were talking about something. I just remember my dad saying, I hate flashbacks. And I felt terrible because I loved them. I felt like a total loser. I never did tell him. He's been gone about 7 years now. I wish so much I could tell him now. Do you remember when you said that? And I was like, oh, I like him. I didn't want him to know. Not funny, the things we say to our kid. I'm sure he had no idea. Anyway, I like flashbacks. I'm just going to say it. I hope that's not a loser thing to like. So tonight, we're actually going to do some flashbacks to chapter 37, because what happens in 37, if you don't know, is so relevant to what happens in chapter 42. So we need to connect those two things to extract all the juicy meaning out of the passage. So hopefully you won't mind if we do some flashbacks. So, and I got some pictures to make it more palatable. So we'll go to flashback number 1 from Genesis chapter 37, and I will pop up your picture for you. And here it is. All right. So here's the picture. Here's the flashback. Then they sat down to eat. This is the brothers. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Where were they going? Egypt. 28b. And they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. All right. Whoops, let me take this picture down. It's going to be a little stilted tonight. I have a lot of pages I have to work with here. Okay, so got that? If you weren't with us, now you know what happened to Joseph. Now, to the present of when we're reading here, chapter 42, 1-5. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" Okay, if you're highlighting, underlining, circling things in your Bible, underline, highlight, circle that. Why do you look at each other? We'll come back to that in just a second. And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Okay, what I told you to circle and look at. Why do you look at one another? I think this is so telling. Obviously, here the brothers knew, we just read in chapter 37, that their brother Joseph was taken to Egypt. 100%. That's where the caravan was going when they sold him as a slave. So picture the scene. Jacob somehow finds out that Egypt has grain. Was it a conversation with someone? Were the boys there for that? We're not really told, but they don't have TV, so somebody had to tell him. And as this conversation comes up about Egypt and the grain, and we need to go there, the boys, they're looking at each other. And Jacob notices it. Now, if you're a parent of more than one child, I don't have to explain this to you, right? I remember my own 2 children, Noel and Matthew. There were times when I was saying something that I thought was fairly innocuous, and all of a sudden I see them, they're looking at each other, and you stop it and you go, "What? What happened? What are you doing?" There's something else going on that you as a parent are not privy to, but it's not good. That's all you know. Is that right? That's what's going on here. And Jacob totally picks up on it. In fact, as we read through this passage, if you sort of look for those little clues, I love that the Bible doesn't come out and just spoon feed us absolutely every detail. Sometimes it's fun to kind of excavate it ourselves. And that's a little hint, I do believe, because nothing is in there by accident, that Jacob just noticed, hmm, interesting. Joseph's gone. And if I mention Egypt, suddenly everybody's looking at each other. So he pretty much just lays them out and he just says, um, why are you looking at each other? Get on your camels and go to Egypt. Okay, so I want to ask you as a group, they had to go. What do you think was on their minds? The boys, not Benjamin, he stayed back. They don't have Joseph, so there's just 10 of them now. 10 boys who sold their brother into Egypt. What were they thinking on that journey? They hadn't been there. They had not gone to Egypt. I mean, we're certainly not told that they did. I assume that they wouldn't go. It was far away. We're talking about 360-ish miles from where they lived. So how many days would that take them? 12 to 18, maybe more, depending on how quickly, obviously, they went, how many camels they had. So this could have taken them 2.5, 3 weeks, maybe 3.5 weeks at the outset. That's a long time to be, thinking about going to Egypt, the very place where they sold their brothers. Carolyn says that she thinks that they're thinking, are we going to come across Joseph? You do wonder if they thought that. Emily says, the guilty stare. Yeah. They feared that they would bump into him, for they knew he was righteous and they were in the wrong. Okay. That had to cross their mind. Like, what do we do if we see him? I mean, it's a big country, and yet he would have been probably put into a population center, right? Lori says, will this be the busted time? Yep. Sandy says, will we see our brother? I agree. Judy says, were they afraid they might encounter Joseph? Excellent comments. I think all of these things had to have been on their minds. They obviously were feeling some angst, right? about going there, as they were looking at each other. So I'm sure it wasn't the most pleasant journey in the world. Add to that the guilt that they had to feel, knowing what they did to their own flesh and blood, and having carried that for the last 13-ish years. And now they have to go to the place where he was sold. Had to be kind of rough to do. I think we have one more comment here. Somebody's saying they're wondering if Joseph is still alive, and if so, if he would recognize them. Oh, Roberta. Thank you, Roberta. Excellent. Somebody else says maybe they're thinking they have to do what they originally planned to do to Joseph. Okay, so you're saying maybe they're actually thinking if we see him, we'll have to kill him. I don't know if they were thinking that or not. I think they were already pretty guilt-ridden. But you know what? The Bible doesn't tell us, so it's all kind of a guess. So another flashback. Are you ready for a flashback? I have another picture for you. Here we go. This is really important. Some of you will remember this. Genesis 37, 5-11. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Now, hear this part. His brothers said to him, are you indeed to reign over us, or are you indeed to rule over us? I mean, the indignation here. So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Let me go to another picture. This is his next dream. Verse 9, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So we said at the outset when we were talking about this that Joseph seemed to understand that this was a prophetic dream and that it was from God. It needed no interpretation. The brothers got it. They got it in a big way, and they hated him for that dream. That was a flashback. Fast forward to where we are tonight in chapter 42, verse 6. Now, Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came, do you see this? And bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Does anybody else have goosebumps? Because I do. It came true. The sovereignty of God. Let's just stop here and let's just absorb the beauty and the wonder of the sovereignty of our amazing, powerful, all knowing God. You understand, we've said this before, that anytime God makes a promise or a prediction or a combination of the two, Satan does everything he can to thwart that. Because if Satan can keep God's word from coming true, then God ceases to be God, right? Because one of the things that makes him who he is that he's never, ever, 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 ever wrong. He knows everything. He is omniscient. He is all powerful, omnipotent. So if Satan can thwart him, then Satan takes over. And so you see, every time God makes a promise or a prediction, Satan, whether he's mentioned, and normally he's not, you just have to look for his fingerprints in the situation. But can you see his fingerprints all over this situation? I mean, he motivates these brothers to actually kill Joseph. I mean, if he can get that accomplished, this whole thing does not come true. But he doesn't quite accomplish that. But at least he gets them to sell him into slavery. But what he does not know, what Satan does not know, is that that is the very catalyst that will make this eventually happen. And that everything that happens to Joseph, even being thrown into prison, is the catalyst that sets him up for God's word. I have more goosebumps like coming over me in waves tonight. Praise God for his power. Satan lost. And exactly what was predicted by God through that dream exactly happened. I shouldn't say exactly. It's not quite 100% fulfilled yet because we have one brother missing and we have dad missing. As soon as we get them in on it, the whole thing is complete. Amazing. So now we're going to see Joseph's reaction as he recognizes his brothers. Chapter 42, 7-11. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, from the land of Canaan, to buy food. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. By the way, not a surprise. He was 17 when he left. He is now 30. Lots of changes happen between 17 and 30 in our physique and our appearance. Number two, he left as a Hebrew. He's still a Hebrew, but now he completely dresses, speaks the language of, and looks like an Egyptian, even down to he would be clean shaven. He would have all the accoutrements of Egypt and what they wore and how they acted. So they don't recognize him at all. Not a surprise. Going on, and he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land, or like where we're vulnerable is what that means. They said to him, no, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. They want to make sure he knows, no, we're not working for some government or something. We're brothers. We're from the same family. Like you wouldn't have 10 spies from the same family. So they're thinking if we tell him this, it will exonerate us from any possible wrongdoing here. They say, we are honest men. Okay. Your servants have never been spies. So imagine Joseph at this moment. I mean, he in his mind has to be recounting everything that we just talked about. It all almost came true. So I thought, what would we do in a situation like that? Like, what would you say if you were Joseph? You don't have to type that in, just to think about. He's a fast thinker. I mean, he could have blurted out, oh my goodness, you guys, it's me, it's Joseph, but he doesn't. So here is my question that I would love you to answer. Why do you think that Joseph did not divulge who he was at this time? He could have. Go ahead and start typing. I love your comments tonight, by the way. You're doing great. He could have. And he didn't have time to really process and think this through. This is going to be like in a moment he has to make a decision. Do I divulge who I am or do I not? and what would be the benefits and losses of each of those scenarios. He's got to make the decision extremely, extremely fast. And he decides not to tell them who he is. So my question is, why do you think that was? Why didn't he just tell them, hey guys, it's me. Can you believe this? And look what you just did. You just bought down to me. Let's put that picture back up about my dreams. He could have said something like that. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say about that. All right. Emily says he's giving them a chance to show their character. All right. Excellent. Alan said he wanted to test his brothers to see if they've changed. Is their conscience pricked by what they did? And he is waiting to find out about his father and Benjamin. That's a really good point about his dad and Benjamin, because at this moment he doesn't know. They're not there. Are they alive? What happened to them? What's going on? So he's holding back. Really good. Susie says to see what their motives are. Okay, great. Dottie says he wanted to find out where their hearts were. Excellent. Somebody says God is sovereign and the timing is in his hands. Okay, so I love how you're saying, even if you back up from Joseph himself, in God's economy, it was not time yet. And because Joseph is being led by him, he made that decision. Excellent. Somebody else says to test them further and to make sure they were being truthful. Thank you, Roberta. That's fabulous. Again, just great, great comments. And I love everything you said. Agree with you. Do they feel bad for what they did? Are they still thrilled that they got rid of him? Do they even wonder if he's still alive? And I notice when the brothers say, we are honest men. Now, in full disclosure, this was in reference to them not being spies, which was true, but I'm sorry, we are honest men. Really? I mean, how did Joseph keep himself from bursting out laughing at that moment? Oh, tell me about how honest you are. I would love to hear this. This is going to be rich. They are utterly dishonest men, obviously. Anyhow, Joseph decides to not let them know yet, and we're going to find out the brilliance of the plan that he puts into place. I mean, this is a multifaceted, multi-leveled sort of, sounds like a multi-level marketing thing. That's not what I mean. But it's just, there's a lot that he's going to do very quickly here that just shows, again, how he's being led by God, but also just how smart this guy is. Amazing wisdom. Verse 12 to 17 of chapter 42. He said to them, no, it is the nakedness of the land you have come to see. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers. They try this again, like he's not getting it. The sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. They don't say he's dead. They just, which is true, they don't know. So they just say he is no more. But Joseph said to them, it is as I said to you, you are spies. By this, you shall be tested by the life of Pharaoh. So I'm swearing on the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. He puts them in prison for 3 days. By the way, undoubtedly, as number 2 in the entire country, the entire nation of Egypt, as the number 2 guy, had he wanted to execute all 10 of those brothers, 100% he would have had the ability to make that happen. I have no doubt in my mind. All he would have had to do is speak the word, and it would have been done. He could have exacted revenge in a very final and fatal way. He also could have said to himself, well, we'll see how you like being sold into slavery, and put them up on the slave block to be sold and dispersed, never to be heard from or seen again. He could have done those things. He doesn't. He is not doing what he's doing to get revenge. And we know this because of what I just said. Had he wanted to be revengeful, there would have been a whole lot easier and better ways to do it. This is not him exacting revenge. This is him, as many of you just said, trying to figure out, where are they? Where are their hearts? Are they ready? Can we reconcile? I need more information. and I have a great way to get it that I know will give me the right answer. He doesn't trust them. He can't ask them, hey, do you guys feel bad about this? I mean, they're going to say whatever they need to get out of it. He needs to discover it for himself. This is brilliant. Verses 18 to 21. On the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. Okay. They probably were not expecting that to come out of his mouth. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. So after 3 days, Joseph changes the terms. What did he do this like on the fly, or was he already planning? I don't know if he changed his mind or that was kind of the plan all along. But he says, okay, I'm not going to keep 9 of you and send one home. I'll let 9 of you go. I'm going to keep one of you here. Flashback. You ready for another flashback? I don't really have a great picture for this, so I pop up this one. Some of you will remember this from chapter 37. So back when Joseph was being sold into slavery. Come now, the brother said, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. If he had just stopped there, he would have been okay. And Reuben said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Okay, so the plan obviously was to kill Joseph. That didn't happen because Reuben was the one who did step up to the plate and say, no, don't kill him. The problem is he didn't go far enough, right? Like, just don't kill him would have been where you should stop with that. But he goes on to say, oh, instead of killing him, let's throw him in the pit. Okay, so flashback, now present day of where we're studying, back to chapter 42, 21 to 22. Then they said to one another, this is in Egypt now, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. By the way, that's new information for us. That was not disclosed back in chapter 37, that he was begging them. He was crying. He was in anguish. And instead of having a little compassion on him, they had no compassion at all, and they did it anyway. Wow. They have carried this with them for the past 13 years. They go on to say, that is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy, but you didn't listen? So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. Don't you love people like that? I'll tell you what, I really, really do not like Reuben. And I like him even less after the study that we're doing tonight. He's just annoying. I told you so. He says, I told you. I didn't want to kill him. You all were the ones. And I was just like, let's just throw him in a pit. Then you went and sold. You just want to say, shut up, Reuben. Just shut up. Excuse me for saying that. I hope my mom doesn't listen to this. That's a word we were never allowed to say. Sorry, Mom. All right, going on. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. He understood every word they were saying. Obviously, he spoke Hebrew. That was his first language, but now he speaks Egyptian, whatever that language is. Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. You notice he didn't cry when he first saw his brothers. He doesn't cry until he hears them say, what we did was wrong. We hurt them. We remember the cries. We remember the anguish. And oh my goodness, God is punishing us for what we did. There is something that if you've ever been blessed enough to have somebody come back to you with a heartfelt apology for something really bad that they did, and to be able to say, what I did was wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I feel terrible. I need forgiveness. Now they weren't saying it to him because they didn't know it was him, but it has the same effect. There is something that wells up within us, just a lot of emotion that comes along with that type of a scenario. If you, by the way, I'll just throw this out there, if you yourself are carrying the guilt of doing something to someone else, it would be a great time to consider going to that person, whether in person or an email or a letter, and doing this for them to say, I've been carrying this guilt for a long time and I was wrong. And I am so sorry that I hurt you. I am so, so sorry. Would you forgive me? That's what reconciliation is, right? When two parties come together and acknowledge the facts of what happened, take the responsibility where the responsibility needs to be taken, and then go forward. Well, he chooses Simeon. Why? Oh, believe me, I tried to find out. The problem is the Bible doesn't tell us and nobody knows. So that was a waste of a half hour of study for me. I just was like, no, there has to be a reason, and I don't know what it is. If anybody else knows the reason, let me know. Would love to know looking over. Okay. So Alan is saying that Simeon was the second oldest after Reuben, which is true. And you know what else? Simeon and Levi, if you recall, were very treacherous brothers. They were the ones who, I believe it was in Shechem, if I'm not mistaken, pretty sure, that they convinced everybody to be circumcised, and then they slaughtered the entire city and really brought reproach on Jacob with all the countries around. So Simeon was had a history of not being the nicest guy. Maybe he was the ringleader. Again, the Bible just doesn't tell us. Maybe it was random. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't ever really like Simeon. Hard to say. Verses 25 to 28. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them, so they didn't know their money was going back in their sacks. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. Can you imagine the moment? He said to his brothers, "Oh, my money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack." At this, their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is this that God has done to us?" They are convinced. This is a guilty conscience. They are convinced God is paying us back. It was 13 years ago, but right now it's over. God has taken us out. They don't know what to do. But Joseph is a genius at how he is setting this situation up. So, flashback, I'm not going to go to pictures and I'm not going to read the passage, but just consider they didn't kill Joseph. If you remember, we just read this earlier because they wanted 20 pieces of silver. They were like, why kill him for free when we can sell him for 20 pieces of silver? So they loved money, obviously, back then. So the question now is kind of multifaceted. We're starting to put this together as we see what Joseph is planning and executing. Do they still love money more than their own flesh and blood? Are they coming back for Simeon? Or will they just leave him to languish in prison? Will they return the money when they come back, or will they not say anything about it and just keep it? All of these are answers Joseph needs to know if he can move forward or not. Moving on, verses 35 to 38. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was with his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. So now it's not just one of them, it's all of them. And Jacob, their father, said to them, listen carefully to his words. You have bereaved me of my children. Interesting. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. Let me stop there for just a second. I was going to go on, but let me stop. Do you pick up here who Jacob blames for Joseph's loss? We really haven't talked about this before, but we're told that when they initially present the bloodied from goat blood coat from Joseph to their dad, and they say, "Here, see this, and see if you can identify whose this is." And he says, "Oh my goodness, a wild animal must have gotten Joseph," and he's just so sad, and nobody can console him. But 13 years have passed, and as with most of us, I have a feeling that as time went by and he mulled and mulled and mulled it over, there were some things that started to not really add up. One of those might have been, how is it that in the vast landscape, you just happened to come across his coat? Like, where did this happen? How did you see it? It's really weird. I wonder, and again, the Bible does not tell us this, just me thinking, wonder if he ever just kind of like casually asked one of the boys by himself, like, tell me where you found this. You could hear them say, "Oh, it's just out in the open field." And then maybe later he asked another one separately, like, "Where did you find that?" "Oh, we were walking through a forest." And you just start to wonder if just maybe some of those inconsistencies of stories came about. But whatever it was, he now blames those boys for the loss of Joseph. Well, Reuben, who I said I like less and less as time goes on, the one who was like, I told you so. If you'd only listened to me, no, we wouldn't be in this situation. Reuben has a solution for this problem, and it's a brilliant one. Here we are. Then Reuben said to his father, I could not believe he said this, "Kill my two sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." Me, I'm the one who was like, "Don't do it in the first place. So if I don't bring him back, you can kill your grandchildren." But Joseph or Jacob said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol," which is just the place of the dead. He said, "I would go down to my own death if this happened." So, I mean, what a ridiculous thing for Reuben to say. "Hey, if I don't bring him back, you can kill your grandchildren. How about that?" Oh boy, there's a good idea. Okay, fine, I'll take you up on it because that's so attractive. Like, what grandfather would do that? It's just ridiculous. Reuben just has this way of like trying to be the hero and being an absolute buffoon in the process. Let me run over to the comments here. Okay, Alan is saying that Joseph selected Simeon as the second oldest and hence the one responsible after Reuben. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So since Reuben had disqualified himself through another escapade that we talked about earlier, quite a stand-up guy here, that because Joseph was the firstborn status, and then obviously he was removed, that Simeon would have been the next one in the order. Very possible, very possible. All right, let's move on to chapter 43. We're not going to get all the way through, but we'll just get going here. The story just keeps getting better and better. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten the grain that they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." Now, this time, Reuben does not respond, or he's not there or something. I guess he figured he kind of gave like the ultimate there, and Jacob said, "No, thank you." So Judah steps up to the plate with a much better idea. Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.'" So they're running out of food again. And Jacob has waited and waited and waited, and he can't wait anymore because they're running out. They don't have any more. And so he says, "Go back to Egypt." Well, Judah just says, as you just heard, no. And this is not normal to tell your father no, even if you're an adult at this time. You kind of do what dad says. But he says, "There's no purpose in it. We'll get down there. We won't have our brother, and we won't even get an audience with this guy. So we're not going to get grain. We're not going to get Simeon, and we're going to have to come all the way back here." So this makes absolutely no sense. And he's right. Verses 6-7, Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother? He's like, "You idiots, why did you tell him that?" And they replied, verse 7, "The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' What we told him was an answer to these questions. Could we in any way have known that he would say, 'Bring your brother down?'" So it's just, they're just like, "Look, we didn't volunteer it. He asked questions. We answered him honestly. We had no idea that it was going to go this way." So Jacob is just kind of mad at them for giving too much information. Remember, they don't have any idea why this guy, who happens to be their brother, would be asking them these personal questions. I was thinking, like, if you were trying to get through customs or something in another country and they started saying, "Is your dad still alive?" Okay, yeah. "Do you have a younger sister?" Yeah. It would really start to make you feel weird, right? Like, why are you asking these questions, and how are you asking such precise questions? Like, do you do this with everybody, or is it just us? So they're not totally sure what's going on at this point, but it's freaking them out. He is in their heads. Verses 8 to 10. And Judah said to his father, to Israel, his father, Israel again is Jacob's new name, same guy, "Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones, our children. I will be a pledge of his safety." Not, "You can kill my kids if I don't bring them back, Reuben. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever." And then he says, "If we had not delayed, we would now have been able to return twice." So he's like, "Look, I know there is nothing in exchange for the life of a person, like giving you my kids' lives or what. There's nothing I can give you except to say, I will be solely responsible for Benjamin, and I will make sure he comes back to you. And if he does not, I will take 100% responsibility and I will bear that for the rest of my life." He's like, "That's all I can give you. But dad, if we hadn't delayed so long, we could have gone and come and gone and come already a couple of times. We need to go. We got to get this done." And I think that's a very reasonable um, response to what he's saying. Also, this is the first mention of Simeon, who's been in prison now for months. And all that he's referred to by his father is your other brother. It's like Benjamin and your other brother, which again, that sort of like separation is just a little indication to me that there is animosity there between Jacob and his other son and sons. He would rather lose Simeon than Benjamin. So I have a question for you. Start typing. What do you think Simeon was thinking all this time? I've never heard anybody really talk about this. It's like he kind of gets forgotten by all of us in prison there. Like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, he's in prison, but he'll get out." Okay, this goes by very quickly when we read it. But remember, it would have taken them 2.5 weeks at least to get to Egypt, and then that same amount of time back. So let's just say a month and a half for the round trip. Let's just round numbers. So they're basically saying we could have gone and come and gone and come a couple of times. So at the very least, we're talking 3 months. But that's probably after they finished most of their grain. How long did that take? How many months worth did they have? So I don't think it would be out of the question to say that Simeon has been in prison now for at least 3 to 4 months and maybe 6, 7 months by this point. What do you think is going on in his mind? He's sitting there in prison. Let's see here. Alan is saying, interestingly, Judah is probably in his late 50s and Benjamin is probably between 35 to 37 years of age. Oh, didn't know that. Interesting information always. Carolyn saying regarding Simeon, where are they? Are they coming back? He's sitting in prison every day. Judy says, did they forget me? Yeah. Somebody else is saying, how much longer am I going to be in here? Am I going to die in here? I'm sure that's what he was thinking. Dottie says, since he knows what they did to Joseph, he probably is wondering if he will ever be free. really good perspective on that. He has a lot of what we parents like to tell our children is thinking time. Did you ever put your child in a chair? Here, you can just sit here and think about this for a long, long time. I used never put times on my kids. I would just tell them it's going to be a long, long time that you will sit here and you can think about what you did. Well, that's what is happening to Simeon right now. Emily says Simeon thought he was abandoned. He knows how awful his brothers are, but he also may have known they need more grain. Oh, I didn't think about that. So he might have a glimmer of hope going, they've got to come back, right? Because they're going to run out of food eventually. I hope they bring Benjamin when they come back. I wonder if he's thinking to himself, what is the holdup? Is it dad? Does dad not care that I'm here? And how abandoned would you feel? This has got to be a rough time for him. And yet, all this time, you know who's overseeing his imprisonment, right? You know Joseph's looking after him. He probably doesn't know that, but you know Joseph's checking, making sure he's taken care of, making sure he's not in trouble, that he's not sick. So Joseph's kind of watching, I'm sure, from a distance. And Simeon has time to mull over his life. And I'm sure that was not a fun situation. Verse 15, this is where we'll end tonight. So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. I feel like I skipped verses. Did I skip verses? I did. I totally skipped verses. I was like, wait, we didn't talk about the present. So sorry. I'm going to back up because I don't want to skip this. Verses 11 to 14. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man. That would be Joseph. A little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise. Go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother. That would be Simeon. He has a name, your other brother, and Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. He just says, I give up. There's just absolutely nothing I can do. Whatever happens, happens. May God protect you. Take double the money, take him presents. Maybe he will be merciful. And then what I just read out of turn a minute ago. So the men took the present, there it is, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. What happens? You're going to have to wait till next week. I know, because we're out of time. I actually was going to take off next week through Christmas, and I'm like, we can't. I have to teach next week. We cannot leave this hanging here for very long. So join us next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday nights on Bible Study Hub, Facebook, and YouTube. And we will see what happens when these boys show up again before Joseph and how things work out. Will he continue to extend mercy, or will he decide they are not recipients of mercy and to exact some retaliation on them? What happens? We will find out next week. Thank you so much for being with me. Oh, I love our Bible Study Hub time together. Monday nights are my favorite night of the whole week. So be well, wrap up that Christmas shopping, and I will hopefully see you back next week, Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Bible Study Hub. Bye-bye.